I didn't mean to overhear anything. I was just setting the catering receipt down on the sideboard, tucked neatly in the corner of the dining room, when I heard Jared's voice carry through the cracked hallway door. The one that never quite latched unless you pushed it. Geneva will take all the kids she always does. 8 total. Free babysitting and free dinner, best deal ever. He laughed then. The kind of laugh that stings even when no one's looking at you. I froze. The paper was still warm in my hand. $1.14.82 paid in full that morning to cover the catering for Christmas Eve. I had told them I'd handle it as my gift this year. I never imagined they'd write me into a job description while they were at it. She'll be fine, Jared went on. Mom lives for this kind of thing. I stepped back without a sound, the receipt still crumpled slightly in my fingers. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, I was just standing very still in a hallway that smelled faintly of floor polish and cinnamon. I could hear the clink of a coffee mug being set down in the kitchen. Then more laughter, his and Lacey's, close and casual. It didn't occur to either of them that I might still be home. Or maybe they didn't care. I took my coat off the hook by the front door and shrugged it on without hesitation. My keys were already in my pocket. I didn't say anything. I didn't wait for a pause in the conversation drifting out from the kitchen. In the next room, my son poured another cup of coffee, still laughing. I turned the knob, quietly stepped outside, and closed the door behind me. The air was colder than I expected, but it felt good, bracing like something honest. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove. Not to run, not to retaliate. Just to get back to a place that was mine. I pulled into my driveway 15 minutes later, parked without turning off the engine, and sat for a moment. The catering receipt was still in my bag. I took it out, unfolded it, and read every line. Then I went inside, straight to the desk, and opened my laptop. My fingers moved quickly, pulling up the cabin rental site I'd bookmarked last summer. It wasn't just this year. It had been building quietly like water rising around your ankles before you realize the floor is flooded. One Saturday after another spent watching Jared's kids so he and Lacey could catch their breath. One holiday after another where I paid for wine table settings, the ham, the backup ham, when the first didn't defrost in time. I never asked for a thank you, but I always listened for one. When I offered to take care of food this year, I meant it as a gesture. A contribution. Something from me, not everything, but they heard it like a handover. Jared sent me a spreadsheet of dietary preferences 3 hours later. Lacey followed with a guest list. 23 people, not including the kids. No one asked what I'd like to bring, or if I'd be sitting down to eat at all. I canceled the catering first. The woman on the phone was kind, even apologetic about the refund policy. I told her not to worry. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the assumption. The expectation that I would show up, pay up, and keep the little ones quiet while everyone else drank wine and talked about their startup portfolios. Then I opened another tab. The cabin was small, barely 2 bedrooms, and a kitchenette, but it was available. 3 nights starting December 23rd. Snow in the area, but not a storm. Wood stove. Simple furniture. Pet-free, smoke-free, people-free. I booked it in under 4 minutes. I didn't touch the kitchen after that. The pans I'd laid out to start side dishes. Still on the counter. The grocery list. Left taped to the fridge. I folded my apron and put it away. Upstairs, I opened my suitcase. Nothing fancy, just jeans, sweaters, enough for quiet. I packed slowly, but my decision had no hesitation. By the time the sun dipped below the neighbor's fence, my bags were zipped. The front porch light turned off, and I was already planning which diner I'd stop at before crossing into Michigan. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a group text or leave a message in the family chat. I just locked the front door behind me and walked to the car with both bags balanced on my shoulders. It wasn't a statement. It was just something I needed to do. The roads were mostly clear. A light layer of snow brushed along the edges, untouched by plows, but not deep enough to slow me down. I kept the radio off. The silence helped me breathe. By the time I crossed out of Dane County, the tension in my neck had started to ease. My fingers stopped curling around the steering wheel so tightly. I wasn't angry, not exactly. It was more like I'd stepped outside a script I'd memorized by heart, but never agreed to. An hour into the drive, I saw the warm flicker of a diner just off the highway. I pulled in, parked near the far end of the lot, and sat for a moment watching the snow flurry around the lone street lamp. The inside glowed yellow, half full, probably locals and truckers waiting out the weather. I ordered black coffee and eggs over toast, not because I was hungry, but because I needed the familiarity. The waitress called me honey, poured my second cup without asking, and didn't seem to care that I stayed longer than I needed to. After I paid, I reached for my phone. 47 notifications. Group messages. Missed calls. 2 from Jared. 1 from Lacey. Several from numbers I didn't save but recognized. Cousins, family friends, people who weren't even coming to Christmas but still wanted to weigh in. I turned the screen face down. Then I turned the phone off completely and slid it into my coat pocket. Outside, the wind had picked up slightly, but the road ahead was clear. I climbed back into the car, turned the engine over, and pulled onto the highway again, northbound, steady, and quiet. The cabin was exactly as described. Clean, a little plain, and dim in all the wrong corners. The overhead lighting buzzed faintly when I first flicked it on, and the baseboards needed repainting, but it smelled like wood and cold air. No voices, no toys underfoot. No one asking me where the extra forks were or if I'd remembered the cranberry sauce. I made coffee in the tiny kitchen strong enough to feel like something. Sat on the couch, read half a chapter of a book I'd started months ago. I didn't need to check the time. No one was waiting on me. That night, I left the curtains open just enough to watch the wind bend through the trees. It took longer than I expected to fall asleep, not because I was restless, but because I wasn't. I couldn't remember the last time I'd gone to bed without building the next day's to-do list in my head. I woke up at 10 the next morning, which startled me more than it should have. I stayed in bed a little longer, listening to the quiet. Then I made eggs, reheated yesterday's coffee, and walked outside to let the cold sting my face. By the time the sun passed its peak, I'd lit the small wood stove and found the good blanket in the cabinet by the front door. I sat with another book, another cup of coffee, and nothing else pulling at my time. At 3:10, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I let it buzz twice before walking over. I didn't have to look to know it was him. I answered. "Where are you?" Jared sounded breathless, irritated. "Everyone's here. The food's not. The kids are hungry." I stared out the window as I spoke. "Don't wait for me," I said calmly. "Or the ham." There was a pause. Then a sputter of something confusion, maybe disbelief, but I didn't stay on the line long enough to find out. I ended the call and turned the phone off again. Then I went back to the fire and picked up my book where I'd left it. Would you like me to continue with now? Or pause for revisions? By nightfall, the stove in the cabin had settled into a steady hum. The book rested open on my chest, unread for several pages, as I watched snow drift past the window like ash. I knew what was happening back home, not because anyone told me, but because I'd lived enough holidays to picture it clearly. 8 kids, no catering. Lacey's cousin with food allergies. Jared's uncle, who always showed up empty-handed, but full of opinions. A folding table set up in the garage to make space. Tension simmering beneath mismatched sweaters and forced smiles. The phone rang again around 6:30. This time I answered, without checking who it was. "You could have told us you weren't coming." Lacey's voice came clipped tight, with the kind of exhaustion that hadn't been earned, it had been assumed borrowed from others, and now unexpectedly returned. You could have asked if I wanted to, I said. There was a pause. I could hear children shouting in the background, something crashing. She didn't respond to what I'd said. Instead, she snapped, "The kids are confused. They've been asking for you all day." "I'm sure they're fine," I said, my voice even. "We had to microwave frozen meatballs," she hissed, like that explained everything. "I see." More silence. Then a sharp exhale. "You made a scene without even being here." "No," I said gently. "I just stepped out of one." I ended the call before she could answer. The phone screen dimmed in my hand, then darkened completely. I left it on the counter and walked to the window. The snow had picked up, brushing against the glass in restless streaks. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and lit a second fire log. Somewhere beyond the trees, a fox cried once and disappeared into the dark. The next morning, the storm had settled into quiet powder. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and stepped outside, the snow crunching softly under my boots. The lake was half frozen, glazed with a thin sheet of ice that mirrored the pale sky. I followed the trail that curved along the edge, breathing air so sharp it cleared the last of the night's heaviness from my chest. For once, I wasn't in a hurry. I didn't check the time or wonder if anyone had eaten breakfast. I didn't feel the itch to call or explain. The stillness wasn't lonely, it was clean. When I came back, the cabin felt different. Not warmer, but freer. I pulled my book from the armchair, the one I'd tried to read before sleep, and started over from the beginning. The story moved slowly, but that was fine. My life had always been about tending to others' pace, waiting for Jared's needs, Lacey's moods, the grandkids' naps, someone else's chaos. Now I turned the pages as if no one would interrupt me. By late afternoon, I made myself a meal. Nothing fancy, just pasta, butter, and salt. I sat at the small kitchen table with the fork balanced loosely in my hand, tasting every bite like it was something earned. Outside, a man from the neighboring cabin walked by, raising a brief wave before continuing down the path. I nodded back, smiling, without thinking. The light began to fade earlier than I expected. I put my dishes in the sink and stood by the window again, watching the trees turn dark against the snow. My reflection stared back at me, softer, somehow steadier. I didn't think about the noise at home or the calls I hadn't answered. I just thought about the woman I used to be, the one who mistook constant endurance for love. I could still see her standing in every hallway I'd ever walked, tired, but still trying. And for the first time, I didn't reach back for her. I let her stay there while I turned off the light and walked toward the quiet. I turned my phone back on the morning of the 25th. The cabin was still and gray, the sky outside heavy with more snow, but I felt rested in a way I hadn't in years. The screen lit up slowly, then brightened with notification after notification. 42 messages, most from the group thread labeled Family Christmas. I hadn't named it that. Someone else had, back when these gatherings still felt like something we built together. I scrolled without reacting. "This is so unlike you. You ruined Christmas." The kids cried. "We had nothing but crackers and chips. You could have at least warned us. We had to explain your absence to everyone. This isn't what family does." Some were from cousins I hadn't seen since summer. A few were from people I didn't even realize were still in the group. One message stood out from my sister-in-law's niece, someone I'd only met twice. "We counted on you. Counted on me. Not asked. Not invited. Counted like a service. Like electricity or heat or chairs. No one asked if I was all right. No one wondered what had changed. Only what was lost when I stepped away." I read them twice, not out of hurt. Out of curiosity. I wanted to see how many ways disappointment could disguise itself as moral outrage. When I finished, I didn't reply. I didn't clarify or explain or soften anything. I tapped leave conversation and then deleted the thread entirely. It didn't feel like a stand. It felt like sweeping a floor clean. Something overdue. The snow had picked up again. I made a cup of tea and watched the flakes build along the windowsill. The quiet felt earned now, not borrowed or stolen, but mine in full. I sipped slowly and opened my book again, barely hearing the old furnace hum to life across the room. I thought about packing up on the 26th. Just for a moment. The old reflex stirred. Go home early. Reset the house, maybe bake something. As a peace offering no one asked for, but everyone expected. But the feeling passed as quickly as it came. Instead, I walked to the office near the front of the cabin, logged into the rental site, and added 2 more nights to my stay. It didn't feel indulgent. It felt necessary. The snow kept coming slower now, almost lazy in the way it drifted across the deck. I stayed in pajamas longer than usual, sat by the fire with a legal pad and pen, and for the first time in years I made a list that had nothing to do with anyone else. It wasn't long, just a few places I'd always meant to visit. Door County in the spring, that little museum in Minneapolis with the glass sculptures, a train ride west maybe, Santa Fe in late summer if I was brave enough for the heat. I didn't write who I'd go with. That part didn't matter. The list grew slowly, 1 idea per line spaced out. I left room for more. By mid-afternoon, I stepped outside and followed the edge of the trail toward the lake again. The footprints from earlier had already disappeared beneath the snow. Clean slate. I walked until I couldn't hear the cabin behind me, then stood still long enough to feel the cold settle deep into my coat. I didn't miss my house. I didn't miss the noise or the clutter or the subtle guilt that seemed to live in every corner of it. The couch with the throw pillows no one ever let me replace. The kitchen with the dented pans I wasn't allowed to toss out because they still worked. The doorbell that rang too often with too many small emergencies that somehow always landed in my lap. I stayed outside until the wind picked up again, then walked back, slowly letting the silence stretch. When I got home, the house was cold in a way that felt honest. No one had been through. No notes taped to the door. No packages left on the porch. No calls waiting on the answering machine. Just silence, and not the kind that punishes. The kind that lets you breathe. I unpacked, slowly put everything back where it belonged, and didn't turn on the television. The refrigerator still held the cranberry juice I bought for the kids, unopened. I poured it down the sink without thinking. No one called. Not Jared. Not Lacey. Not even the grandkids who used to send voice memos saying they missed my pancakes. I didn't check in. I didn't ask if everything turned out okay. And they didn't offer. It took 2 days before someone reached out. An aunt from my late husband's side. We'd never been especially close, but she sent a short message. Hope you're okay. Heard things got tense. I answered simply, I am. After that, I sat down at the desk and pulled out the folder I kept tucked in the second drawer, the one labeled Estate and Planning. I'd updated it last year, but it felt right to look again. Not out of spite, just out of precision. I went through each section carefully. The savings account I'd once set aside for Jared still untouched. The house title. The medical directive. The trust for the grandchildren. I made a few edits. Jared's name came off 2 designations. I replaced it with someone else's, someone who wasn't related but had shown up when it mattered. The rest I left as is. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like brushing dust off a shelf and seeing it clearly again. No one mentioned the missing ham. No one apologized or explained. The group thread stayed quiet. The silence didn't bother me. I made tea that evening and sat by the window, the same one where I used to watch for Jared's car, pulling up with last-minute requests. This time I watched the street grow dark and didn't wait for anyone. New Year's came and went without a brunch. I didn't make the quiche Lacey liked or arrange the folding chairs in the den. No one asked if I was hosting. Maybe they assumed I wouldn't. Maybe they hoped I would. Either way, the phone stayed silent, and I let it. I spent the first week of January cleaning out drawers. Not for anyone else. Not to make room for guests or grandkids' toys. Just to see what I had when I wasn't storing things for other people. Old receipts. Holiday napkins I never liked. A set of puzzle pieces from a box that had long been donated. I threw them out without guilt. On the second Thursday of the month, I walked into the local library and sat through a community lecture on elder law. I didn't need it right away, but I liked hearing it from someone who wasn't trying to sell me anything. There was something grounding about knowing exactly what my choices were and that they were mine. That night, I booked a trip to Santa Fe for April. Just me. I chose a little casita near the plaza with no cancellation policy and no shared walls. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't ask for approval. I wrote the dates on my kitchen calendar in blue ink and underlined them twice. I'm not angry. I'm not wounded. I'm not waiting for an apology that's never coming. I'm just not on call anymore. Not the emergency contact. Not the weekend help. Not the giver of extra chairs, extra hours, extra patience. Not the one who fills in all the blank spots others leave behind. Whatever version of me they kept in their heads, the one who always said yes, always stayed late, always stepped in, I don't owe her anything anymore. She did her part. She made the meals and smoothed the edges and made sure everyone had what they needed. She's resting now, and I'm finally living in the space she left behind.